Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, we are from group 5 and today we are going to present our discussion about psychoanalytic criticism. Before we start our presentation, let me introduce our group member first. My name is Diani Rawati and my friends Afla Alfia Khairunisa and Vicky Andrian. The explanation about psychoanalytic criticism will divide it into 4 parts. The first is introduction, the second is about historical development, and the third is assumption, and the last is about methodology. Now we go to the introduction. In the study of literary criticism, there are many theories to evaluate, critics, and interpret literary work, one of which is psychoanalytic criticism. Psychoanalytic criticism itself is a literary theory which in method, concept, or form is influenced by the tradition of psychoanalysis begun by Sigmund Freud. Psychoanalytic criticism can give useful clues to the baffling symbols, actions, and settings in a literary work. However, like all forms of literary criticism, it has its limits. For one thing, some critics rely on psychocriticism as a one-size-fits-all approach, when other literary scholars argue that no one approach can adequately illuminate or interpret a complex work of art.
Historical development. There are 4 experts who express their opinions about this psychoanalysis. The first is Sigmund Freud. Freud maintained that no man is truly conscious or completely unconscious, and he prefers to talk about modes of consciousness or the unconscious. The irrational, instinctual, unknown, and the conscious was part of the soul that Freud called it the id, and the rational, logical part which awakens the ego. The third part, the superego, acts like an internal censorship, causing us to make moral judgment in the light of social pressure. The task of the ego is to mediate between the instinctual desire of the id and the demands of the social pressure exerted by the superego. And for Freud, a literary work is an external expression of the author's subconscious mind. Hence, literary works should be treated like dreams, applying psychoanalytic techniques to text to uncover hidden motivation, desires from the author. The second is Carl Gustav Jung. Carl Gustav Jung rejected Freud's analysis of the unconscious content, and he formulated a new approach to understanding a literary work. According to Jung, the human soul consists of 3 parts: consciousness, personal unconsciousness, and collective unconscious. The conscious or waking state is directly affected by unconsciousness. In turn, the subconscious is divided into 2 parts. The first part, or personal unconscious, exists just below the surface of consciousness and contains the element of all personal affairs that occur every day of our everyday life. What may exist in one person's personal unconscious may not appear in another. But deep in the soul and birthed from human conscious lies the collective unconscious, which holds the cumulative knowledge, experience, and the images of all humanity. And the third is Hermann Northrop Frye. Frye believes that all literary works consist of one whole and whole story called monomyth. This monomyth can be best described as a circle containing 4 separate phases, with each phase corresponding to the season of the year and the specific cycle of human experience. First is romance phase, which lies at the top of the circle, is our summer story. In story type, all our wishes are fulfilled and we can achieve total happiness. At the bottom of the circle is the winter, or anti-romance phase. As opposed to summer, this phase tells of slavery, imprisonment, frustration, and fear. Midway between romance and anti-romance and to the right of the circle is spring, or comedy. This phase relates to the story of our awakening from anti-romance and frustration to freedom and happiness. Correspondingly, the whole circle is tragedy or fall. telling of our fall from the phase of romance and from happiness and freedom to disaster. And the last is Jack Mary Emily Lacan. Lacan borrows some of the theories of the father of modern linguistics, Ferdinand de Saussure. Unlike Freud, who declared the unconscious to be chaotic and unstructured, Lacan's decision was that the unconscious is structured like language, and it was for Saussure that Lacan found the structure of language. Through the chain of linguistic reasoning, Lacan disagrees with Saussure's basic principle that language is stable, that is, the word or symbol represent one entity. For Lacan, language becomes figurative and the only way by which a person defines himself. In Lacan's view, there is no absolute from outside language itself. Like Freud, Lacan also focused on dreams but stated that dreams, like language itself, are structured on linguistic principle and can therefore be scientifically analyzed.
And now we go to the assumption. There are several assumptions in psychoanalytic criticism. The first one is the foundation for all forms of psychoanalytic criticism is Freud's theories and the techniques he developed during his psychiatric practice. And the second one is when Freud's assumption is that all artists, including authors, are neurotic. Unlike other neurotic artists, escape from neurosis by creating his or her art. The third is motivation for writing any story is to gratify some secret desire, some forbidden wish that probably developed in author's infancy. And then latent content, it is the wish of dream. And the last is manifest content, when the unconscious allowed the dreamer to remember of somewhat changed and oftentimes a radically different dream. Now, we'll talk about mental process. The mental process has three psychic zones. The first one is 8. It's the instinctual, pleasure-seeking part of the mind. The 8 knows no values, no good and evil, no morality. It is the source of all our aggressions and desires. And the second one is ego. The ego is governed by the reality principle. Ego is the part of the mind that controls but does not repress the it. A large portion of the ego is unconscious. And the third one is superego. It is the part of the mind that represses the its impulses. It acts as the moral censor against it. The development of superego is determined by what society considers to be bad or good behavior. Thus, it is dominated by the morality principle.
Here we have the methodology. The methodology comes from the four figures here, Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Northrop Frye, and Jacques Lacan that have already explained before. So basically, the methodology is arguing that literary texts or works are manifestation of authors' own neuroses. It is assuming that all characters in literary work are projection of the author's psyche. It is also amassing biographical data of an author through biographies, personal letters, lectures, and any other document deemed related in some way to the author. For several decades, psychoanalytic criticism focused only on the author, like I have said above about the psychobiography. But in the 1950s, individual character within a text became the focus of the psychoanalytic criticism. So analyzing the character's motivations and actions in the text becomes also the methodology. And it is also combining the psychoanalytic analysis of the author and also the reader. So finally, the object of psychoanalytic criticism can be the psychoanalysis of the author or of a particular interesting character. And what we have to note here is, to interpret a text using psychoanalytical theory, it's essential to understand ourselves from a Freudian point of view. But the most recent type of psychoanalytical criticism to appear is developed by Lacan. and no matter which thought a critic chooses to use, he or she must master psychoanalytic theories and practice of Freud to interpret a text clearly and credibly. The last one, I'm going to give a bit summary about psychoanalytic criticism. So basically, psychoanalytic criticism explores the unconsciousness motives, dream, or fantasy of the author and or his characters. And now, individual character within a text, however, becomes the focus of this psychoanalytic criticism. That's all from Group 5. Thank you so much and see you next time.